Welcome into the Harvest, friends. We are here to bring you the confidence you need to be a disciple and make disciples in the everyday places of life. My name is Lakeith. I'm joined here by my two co-hosts, Abigail and Andrew. How you guys doing?
Doing great,
Hey,
brother. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys too. It feels like it's been a long time, so we apologize for our visuals for the Zoom meeting. The podcast is going to look a little different over the next maybe couple months. But the reason is our good friend and good partner in the faith, Zach. He is no longer with us. He is
he's not dead.
he's a traveling man. He's not dead. He's still alive. He's doing well. But I think the Lord is calling him somewhere else. So we're kind of praying through next step. But we're so thankful for his work that he's done. As you can tell, we're going to be downgraded for a little bit. We don't have that powerhouse with us. But yeah, you guys want to send Zach off with anything?
Man, he definitely helped us look good, or the best we could look, for quite some time. And so I'm gonna really miss him. It's gonna be sad to not have his grumpy opinions, to make me a better person. So I really appreciate I appreciate it, and I'm just gonna like keep his like voice in the back of my mind as I move forward to try to strive to be better. So I'm gonna really miss that.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like I don't know the chemical composition of the team is definitely different because Zach, like you said, Abby, he's a perfectionist. He's got very strong opinions about things, and so it was kind of always funny. I feel like you and he especially
Oh man, the
was
rivalry.
the dynamic duo on these podcast sessions.
Oh, I just loved it because I really, it was like it was a challenge to just ruffle Zach's feathers. It's like
So
my goal in life.
so some of that was obviously you're in Texas, we're here in California, and Zach is our tech guy. So just so our listeners and viewers can imagine, Zach's trying to walk Abby through a lot of tech issues, whether it's like getting her microphone to work or helping her find the link to log on. I don't know. It was every episode was
Yes.
probably something, but
Yeah, because
Zach,
I'm not good at that stuff, you guys. So
yeah,
No, it was truly an adventure to say the least. And for
right.
you guys that know Zach, he's yeah, walking with the Lord. He's doing well. We're sorry to the fans who never got to meet him. We couldn't get him on camera. We tried every
Right.
angle we
tried so
got.
hard.
He does
Abby, I mean, she
exist.
threw her
He's
best.
a real
He
person.
exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
no, we love Zach. Zach, if you're listening, we hope you're doing well. Right now, I think he's on the drive. I think he's in Arizona right now. But
Yeah, he's
Zach,
in easy. Yep.
he's been a huge part of the team over the past 2 years, and yes, folks will definitely kind of see what his loss means here over the next few episodes while we try to figure out everything he was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, Zach.
absolutely.
So we know you're the Nama, so you probably don't want these flowers right now, but we're giving you your flowers, brother. Here you go, man. So
Right.
I love it.
all right, we have a listener question here today coming from Brian Hero. I think it's a really good question. He says, in what ways are you supposed to imitate Christ? Or what ways are we supposed to imitate Christ? Who wants to tackle that one first from Brian?
Well, I'll jump in first, just because I got to cheat. Brian and I actually are good friends, and he had sent this in I think a couple months ago, but then he and I had a chance to catch up on the phone last week, and so we talked a little bit about this. So I'll share just a little bit of what we had talked about there, and then would love to get your guys' thoughts too. First, I think for people who do appreciate that we're supposed to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, a lot of times we default to the character of Jesus. So Jesus was kind, Jesus was loving, Jesus was gentle. And I totally agree with that. I do think we're supposed to follow in the footsteps of Jesus in terms of his character as a person. He was a good, upright, righteous man, and we should be striving to imitate him in that sense. But there were a few other things that sometimes I know in my own life I've overlooked, you guys, and three that came to mind were first, his perspective. As I read the Gospels, I'm always struck that Jesus, he didn't get caught up in the things that we tend to get caught up. And so he had a much broader perspective of life, time, his purpose on earth. And I would just kind of summarize that in that, Jesus had an eternal perspective. And so I think that's a challenge for us, that we tend to think very in the moment. We think things of this earth. And one way that we should be striving to imitate Jesus is his perspective. And then the second, I think, was his attitude. And I think of that verse in Philippians 2, where it says, have the same attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. Um, and it had to do specifically with his willingness to submit to the Father, that he did not consider himself above obedience, but he humbled himself. He took on the form of a human, and he became obedient even unto death. So I think an attitude of submission and being a servant was a second way. And the last thing was his mission. And this is probably the one that gets missed the most, I think, by believers, because Jesus said it is finished when he was on the cross. And so in that sense, his mission of dying as the Lamb of God was finished. But his mission of spreading the message that God had sent him to the earth to spread, that's one that he passed on to his disciples. And that's why the Great Commission is so important, to go therefore and make disciples of all nations. That mission is still ongoing. Jesus said to do that until the end of the age. And so I think his perspective, having an eternal perspective, his attitude of submission and servanthood, and then his mission, that he was on mission for God to reconnect others to him, are three ways that I want to imitate Jesus. And I know that that's like really packaged, but that's because I got to have a conversation with Brian. So before I throw it to you guys, I think part of what Brian was getting at was, well, obviously Jesus was a Jewish man in a Jewish culture 2,000 years ago. He wore sandals. He didn't have social media. So like I kind of laid out three very broad ways that we can imitate Jesus, but I guess how extreme do we take it? Jesus didn't write a book. He didn't start a seminary. So like we're doing stuff online. We're not really imitating Jesus in those specific ways. So where's the line between following him in a general way and following his specific actions? What do you guys think?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Andrew just updated a question on us and added another layer to it.
Well, he already answered the first one, so it was like, well, let's have a different question.
Right. So, yeah, in what ways are we supposed to imitate Jesus? I think a big thing that came to mind to me is being able to relate to people. I don't know how Jesus pulled it off, but each individual he interacted with that we have recorded, he was able to connect and relate with them in a way that drew them out. So I don't know if it was just asking the right questions or asking piercing questions, but Jesus was a master at it. He always had a way of drawing people out. So I want to get better at being timely with my words, asking the right questions, being able to relate to people. It seemed like he used like everyday things. I know we talk a lot about making disciples in everyday places of life, but yeah, he used you see that tree over there, you see this mountain right here, and go call your husband. How did he know that? Like, how did he how did he know like right where that button was to press it? So yeah, I want to keep growing and being like Jesus in that way, to ask the right questions, to really get people to draw themselves out. So because we do want them to come to him eventually. And a part of that is being able to relate to them and help them see their need for him. And to do that, I think we got to be tactful like Jesus. So asking good questions is mine.
That's a good one. And I think, Andrew, to kind of go back to what you were asking there at the end, because we live in a different culture, like completely different. I mean, for one, we're not in a Jewish culture. So there was definitely a lot going on in that environment. I mean, a different time, just literally everything. And so I think the way you guys both responded is you're picking out the qualities of who Jesus was. And how can we then put those into our modern world? So what I was hearing from you were several things that I'd written down as well. So one is that he 100% knew his identity in the Father. Like he just got it like 100%, but that was also because he was God too. So that helped. But for us, I think we do need to make that a really high priority for ourselves. Do we know our identity in Christ? And I think that's an ongoing thing. I think we're always learning that, but continually bringing that back in our relationship with God and continuing to ask Him about who we are in Christ Jesus is really helpful in what we're going to do and how we're going to interact with others. And then he was very, very missional. And I think this can be hard too, because I'm like, man, he had just this very specific mission laid out for him. And I don't feel like my mission is that specific, right? And so I think that brings me back to the Great Commission, which is kind of our very specific mission that we've been given. And how can we just be so tied into it that we don't get distracted? And so I agree with you, Keith, in that these are things that I feel like all need work, but that we can really spend a lifetime trying to be like Jesus in these ways. And I love the asking questions thing, because man, he really did just know how to like just get into the heart of an issue. I'm a terrible question asker. But I think the last one is his prayer life was just rock star. And that's going to come up later in this episode too, Keith. So I won't go into it too much here. But I think that just the way Jesus did really work hard to stay tied in with the Father was is key to who he was and who and like how his ministry played out. So I think those are the areas that we can imitate in our modern world. And I think it's going to look different, obviously, but those are things that if we, I think, just really strive for, and probably for the rest of our lives, then we're on the right track.
Yeah, I would say one resource if folks want to dig deeper into this, and we've got this on the website, intotheharvest.org. It's the book is called Master Plan of Evangelism by Robert Coleman. And some of you who are watching or listening, you're familiar with that book, but others you may not have checked it out. I would highly recommend it. It highlights 8 principles from the life of Jesus that carry over into modern times. And so we've also got a study guide on there that's free, so you can download that and work through that with the book. And hopefully that'll help you guys dig deeper into this topic that Brian asked. Yeah, great question, Brian.
Yeah, Andrew just wants you guys to check out the new website because we've been doing a lot of work on that. So please go check it out. And we love getting questions. We really do. So if you're listening and anything comes to mind and you want us to try to tackle it, send us a message on Facebook or message us on Instagram or send us an email at info@intotheharvest.org. It's always a mouthful trying to get that out. I apologize, guys. But yeah, send us your questions. For our main topic today, we're going to be talking about increasing my faith. I'm super grateful to have you guys who've been following us for a long time. So if you made it to this episode, you're probably like a loyal listener. And for that, we're super grateful. But that also means that you've been around the block. Like you're no longer, you're not a baby believer. You're not who's new to the faith. So we want to speak to you guys about how do we increase our faith. So the first question that we have is, what are some of the qualities a mature believer should possess? In your own life, how have you seen fruit be important? So yeah, what are some of the qualities that you would look for in a mature believer, or how would you gauge a person off of that? And then obviously, a tree is known by its fruit. So why is that portion of it important as well? Andrew, you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it. When I was reflecting on this question, I think the first thing that stood out to me was just the importance of maturity, or even the concept of maturity. And I want to start there because when I was a young believer, that isn't something that I actually was familiar with. I guess my idea of being a Christian was that you ascribe to a certain set of beliefs and you basically signed up for being a Christian versus other beliefs that you could have, whether that was atheism or being a Muslim or being Jewish, and you were just sort of joining a team, I guess, or you were ascribing to a certain set of beliefs. And once you had signed up, that was it. You didn't really have anything to do except try to be a decent person and wait for the next life. And so, I didn't have this idea that you were supposed to actually progress and grow and mature. But you're right, the Bible over and over gives us this picture, whether it's through comparing it to physical birth. Jesus said you had to be born again, or whether it's paralleling it with fruitfulness and not just being planted, but growing to maturity and bearing fruit. All throughout the scriptures, there's the idea that we as believers we're going to start immature and we're going to grow to maturity. And so I love this question because I do think that it should be what describes our own faith. And I think the starting point for me is becoming more focused on others and more focused on God. And so John the Baptist has that famous verse where he says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." And so I think someone who's maturing, and I've seen this in my own life, their life becomes more and more about God's plan for them, or what God says about their identity, going back, Abby, to what you were saying, rather than what I think about my identity or what I want to accomplish in life. So I think you become more focused on God, more God-centered versus self-centered. And that begins to show up in submission. And then I think you become more focused on others as well, other people around you. And that really shows up on wanting to serve and actually help others, whether that's in practical ways or whether it's helping them come to faith and get to know God. And so I think that's actually the quality that should be present, throughout our maturing, whether it's very early days or for those of us who've been walking with Jesus for a while, we should still be striving to be more focused on others, whether focused on God, focused on other humans. And I think that's why Jesus, the very first thing he said is, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself. And so I think if we're not willing to begin to deny ourselves and begin to turn outward, then it's really hard to mature. And you really see this even with kids. Like the most selfish humans on the planet are 1 month olds, like 2 months old. They have no concern over how rough a day the parents have had or how tired mom is. I mean, if the baby is hungry, that's all the baby's focused on is its own life, its own world, and has no clue what else is going on in the cosmos around them. So I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind is becoming more others focused and less self-focused.
That's really funny. You like totally stole my example, except I didn't go like that far back. I was like, have you met a 2-year-old?
Yes.
So that's really nice of you to like give them some time. But honestly, have you met a 2-year-old?
Right.
But that's really such a great point. And I think to add to that, when walking through this in my mind before we got started, was just how I feel like over time we realize how little we do know. I think if you talked to me when I was in my 20s, I was like pretty sure that I knew what was up in life. Like, in fact, Andrew did know me when I was in my 20s, and I'm probably totally was like, Andrew, let me help you. So I think that over time, we just realize more and more like how much we don't know, which I know it sounds totally backwards, but I really do think that is true maturity, is realizing just how little we are, and just how we were talking about fruit there, like what is fruit important, and it is, but I think that the longer I'm around on this planet and the longer I do ministry, the more I realize that even the fruit has very little to. I don't even want to take credit for any of it, because I know that it's not because of us at all. It's really just the Holy Spirit. So it sounds like really like a downer and a depressing thing, but it's not. It's actually really wonderful to realize that I don't know very much. And what I do know, I probably don't know as well as I thought I did. And then also that any fruit that we get to see is just a gift from the Father, because really, we're just a mess. So yeah, it's not. I'm here to just point to how little I do know. So that's my answer.
No, I mean, I think that's real good. That's some good humble pie for us. dial back my answer a little bit then, I'm just but, I think it's similar, like what you were saying, earlier, Andrew, about being focused on others, so you take a guy like Peter, who we were drawing a lot of this motivation from this question from, but, um, yeah, at one point, Jesus was telling Peter, like, "Hey, the enemy wants you, trying to sift you like wheat, but I pray for you that your faith may not fail. And when you turn, strengthen your brothers, So, like, really, both of you were saying about not being selfish. Like, we almost take the attention off of ourselves. Like, it's not just us or our walk with Jesus and us being healthy for the sake of not, missing out on the bad eternity, but it's to help others. Like, Jesus wants to use our lives to impact other people. So I think that that's where that fruit like comes into play and it plays out because
Mm.
the result of your life should be people. We should really be zooming in on that. And yeah, I think that's easier said than done sometimes. I'm not gonna lie because our kids are all pretty selfish, but man, secretly I'm pretty selfish too. So whether it's my time or my emotional capacity or my mental capacity, sometimes I do not want to give that away.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, Abby, for the Holy Spirit, just bringing promises to mind. Like, hey, it's not when you've turned, strengthen your brothers. Not when you've turned, go relax or
Right.
go really smell the roses. So
Yeah, I think that you're really connecting to another quality, I think, which is sacrifice.
yeah, good word for it. Yeah.
That's something that should be more and more characteristic of our lives because you can be more focused on other people, like you can be more aware of the needs around you, and just be like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like
hmm
that's so someone else will step up and take care of that need, but it's always inspiring to see people and again, like if you've got kids, I've got 4 kids. When you see kids, like those are really proud moments for a parent, to see a kid not only see the need, but then go out of his or her way to help a younger sibling out or help mom or dad out. It really is a sign of, well, there's a maturing that's happening in this kid that is a huge encouragement to see. And I think I just imagine that that's how God feels, when He sees us not only see needs, but we be willing to kind of put our own desires second and make some sacrifices to help others out.
Yeah, I think, this is one of the things that we probably all saw a lot of with in this COVID season was we all got a little like back into self-involvement in a lot of ways because we were all like, how are we doing? How is it doing? Yeah, I mean, this is why I can talk about it because I was there. I can tell you from firsthand experience. But I think I realized that it's actually habits too. Like I had a habit of being outward focused, and then I got out of the habit of being
Yeah.
outward focused, and that was humbling. I didn't know it could happen so quickly, but you can really get in the either way. So I hope that's encouraging. If you start this, if you think, you know what, we're going to start being outward focused and we're going to like do the hard thing, which is like talking to our neighbors or like that's stressful and I don't like to talk to strangers, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to start doing it. Well, it really actually does get easier over time. Like these are things that do get easier. If you're like, I'm going to open my house up for church or for a Bible study or for a gathering, like the first few times you're really anxious and you have like a lot of stress related to what will that look like? Will people look under my bathroom sink? That will start to enter your mind. And then you just start to not care and you're like, I hope they see, what's going on under my bathroom sink because it's dirty. So I think like these are things that we can actually build the muscle of each one of these elements. Like this is not a lost cause for us, but I think it's having the desire to do it, to be obedient in those areas, and then asking the Lord to help us to do it because we can't just do it in our own strength. But yeah, I don't know. I think I was surprised how quickly I lost some of my outward focus muscles.
I mean, thanks for being vulnerable on that one. I think that's really helpful for sure. And I'm telling you, I really appreciate learning from you guys too, because when you come across passages where Jesus is saying like, "Hey, who seeks save his life will lose his life. Nobody. He who loses his life will save his life. It's like, I think this is what they're talking about. Like, I think this is what Jesus is getting at. So, yeah, it's encouraging. So I know you guys are being humble and being vulnerable, but it's really helpful.
We're being mature, Keith.
There
Mature
it
in
is.
our faith right now.
I'm just really trying hard.
Really trying real hard. All right, for our second question on our topic of increasing your faith, we want to talk about not becoming stagnant. So, how do you not become stagnant in your walk with the Lord? And how should we apply verses like Second Peter, where it lists all of these qualities that a mature believer should have? And then it says, if these qualities are yours and they're increasing, it will keep you from becoming ineffective and unfruitful in your walk in the Lord. So, yeah, how do you not become stagnant, guys? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. How do we keep growing?
Yeah, Abby, you want to take a stab at that one first? How do we? I think it's a great
Yeah.
question because
Me too.
you can obviously, a lot of times we can equate knowledge or time as a believer with maturity. Like, oh, I've been a believer for 20 years, so I must be mature, right? But there's this second issue of not becoming stagnant, which usually happens when you have been a believer for a long time. So what do you think, Abs?
I think a lot of it has to do with what I said when answering the first question, which is about thinking you know everything. So just knowing that you don't, and that there's always something new to learn. And I think the other part to that is not getting comfortable, because I can easily work hard for something, and then it, like I was just saying, we get into the routine of like having people in our house or talking to our neighbors. And then we think, oh, this is it. Like, this is all. And now I've figured it all out and now I'm good to go. And so it's allowing things to challenge you, to see that there's still blind spots that we have. We really are all like onions. And the Lord is really like taking down those layers in all of us. And thank goodness he doesn't just rip it all off in one go, because none of us would survive it. But instead, he is, the being faithful with a little, and he's going to give more, and you can be faithful with more. And so I think it's seeing our lives in that way of, if we're being faithful in the little things, then it feels big at first, and then it feels little, and then he's going to add something else. So I think there's always needs to be this like tension there, I think. And so for me, it's when I start to feel comfortable is when I start praying that verse, like, search my heart and know my mind, see if there's any anxious thoughts in me, like, because I know I'm probably putting on blinders about something, because that's going to make me feel it's going to be something new. And I don't like new stuff at all. I really hate new. So I think for me, it's just really knowing that there's always more. He'll always take us deeper. And that's pretty exciting, actually. So I think that should help us to not feel stagnant too. Maybe it should be more like, what's going to make us feel tired? Like, how do we overcome feeling like exhausted and tired?
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about that. Somebody else talk about that, because that's what I need to know the answer to. How do you not want to quit and just be super exhausted by it all?
Yeah. Well, I almost feel like that's a not a different subject, but you could spend a whole lot of time like drilling down on that.
Or next time, you guys.
Maybe we could.
Yeah.
Because I do think that there's an issue there, and a lot of believers struggle with that. That if they are really striving to follow Jesus and serve, you can experience burnout.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I do think that that's something worth.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's like the opposite side of stagnation. But you were talking about being comfortable, and that's one of the things it's one of those weird ironies in life that I'm always seeking in comfort like that. I want to find that space where I'm in the zone, and things are going the way I hope they would go, and I feel good but not overstretched. And I know this is just a general concept. This isn't just a Christian concept, but in order for growth to happen, you really have to be just a bit out of your comfort zone, but not too far out of it. If you're too far out of it, then you just get destroyed, or you get overwhelmed or broken. And this is true for physical training as well as I think spiritual training, or even just intellectual training. If you're trying to teach a fourth grader, seventh grade level academics, it's not going to help them. They're actually going to get discouraged and frustrated. So you always want to be just a little bit out of your comfort zone, but you don't want to be comfortable, or you're not going to be growing. And like you said, Abby, I think it's one of the great promises is that Jesus and the Lord is going to lead us into challenging times and challenging circumstances because He wants us to grow. So if you're just completely comfortable, then that is probably a little bit of a yellow flag that, man, am I missing it? Because the Lord will definitely give you moments of rest, but generally speaking, He's going to be wanting us to be stressed and to be in those uncomfortable but not overwhelming circumstances so that we can become more like Him.
I think it's great that we're in our faith, our belief in Jesus and in the Bible. Like we don't have one of those faiths where you kind of arrive to your destination. So like if I do these three things, then that's it. Like and we know that like the moment you accept Jesus and you recognize and respond to who He is, eternity starts right then. Yeah, Jesus has us forever. But yeah, that's not game over. So I feel like as believers, we're always chasing, like we're always thriving. We never come to this point where it's like, okay, I've made it. I can rest on my laurels, and I'm good right here. I don't need anything else. But because there's always something to be working on. So that's like one of the first things that comes to mind. And then I think we have a very real example in our bodies how I get like my body gets nicked up and I'm sore or something like that. And that's like, man, this body's just wasting away. And at the same time, like we get to renew what's in here. God gets to work on things from the past or, sin or like you name it. We can be made new on the inside as the outside is, going down. So that kind of encourages me not to stay still because there's still more work to do. And I thought Andrew was going to shout himself out, but I should have known better. But he definitely motivated me a lot for this question. Just thinking about, how you went from running, 1 or 2 miles to doing long runs to a marathon to an ultra marathon. But there had to be something in you that pushed you to that next level. And obviously you're a little bit older than Abby and I. Uh, but you're climbing new mountains, man. So, yeah, I think just having I don't know, like finding whatever it is that makes you go, spiritually speaking. Like I'm not just talking about any like ways to keep it new, doing something you haven't done before. But there's so many possibilities with our faith because God has left it open. So.
Yeah, there's a quote that I've heard people, who knows who came up with it. They said that you don't get old and stop working out. You stop working out and you get old. And I think that I think there's some truth to that spiritually, that because all of us just kind of want to get to that point in life where um, you don't have to strive anymore. Like you did that, you had those experiences, you pushed yourself really hard. But again, like that's the subtle irony or the twist in life, I think spiritually or physically, that when you stop really striving and growing, in a sense, life is over at that point. And you're just sort of waiting to die. So I think it's true spiritually too, that we should always be growing. We should always be working out our faith, because that's actually where we're going to experience life. We're going to be going forward and not backwards. So
Yeah, that reminds me of many, many years ago, I did like a stint doing Meals on Wheels for like elderly people who are stuck at home. And one of the things that I learned from that experience is there are old people and then there are old people, and they can be the same age, but it really does have to do
yes.
with a mentality. And I think it really boils down to where the focus is. And it probably is starting now for us. Like you think like, oh, I've got, some 40 plus years until I have to worry about that. I don't know. It depends on how long you think you're going to live. But I think it really is starting now, because are we outward focused now? Or are we inward focused now? Because as time goes on, if you're already being inward focused, there's just going to be more and more to worry about. Like I'm going to just start having like achy bones. And then when you talk to me, all I'm going to tell you about are my achy bones. But if you've had an outward focused attitude this whole time, then you're going to tell us about your grandchildren or your neighbor, or what's going on at the senior center or whatever. There's a difference just in mentality, and we can start that now. In fact, we should while we're not having achy bones, because they're going to be harder and harder to ignore. So I think that all wraps up spiritually as well. I just love generations in a church to see, literally from babies all the way up until, the elderly. And a lot of that has to do with that reminder of what our faith can still do and still accomplish when we are older. And I think a lot of that has to do with that outward focus. And we got to practice that. We got to work those muscles. Andrew's talking about literal muscles, but I'm not, because that's not how I work.
Hey, it still was motivating that, but you guys are dropping bombs right now. So
yeah.
What is an ultra marathon? Like, how many miles is that?
So an ultra marathon is anything over a marathon, technically. So a marathon's 26 miles. So if you run 27 miles, I guess you've done an ultra marathon, because it's more.
So how much did you do?
So this past weekend, I did a 50-mile race in Utah, which was amazing. It was in Bryce Canyon National Park.
Very nice pictures.
Yeah, cool. Some of you, I had never been there, but beautiful, beautiful area. And yeah, it was an adventure for sure. But they go all the way up to like 200 plus miles. So there's some crazy people out there.
Yeah, you know what? If you have to take a nap in between, then you're running too long. Yeah. That's just my little word of advice.
People do
that is intense. I know. Goodness.
Oh man. Wow. Well, congratulations. That really is awesome.
Thanks.
We won't brush over that too much, because that's pretty.
Oh, right. All right. For our faith and culture section, we want to talk about some heavy stuff, because it relates to what's going on in society today. Like the big topic, a lot of people are talking about it, and as believers, we are concerned. And this is a space where we can talk about it. So, guys, what are your thoughts on everything that's going on in the Middle East with Gaza, Palestine, Israel, and the unrest over there? And I know you've been berated with a bunch of news articles or videos or thoughts on social media. So, Andrew, what do you think about the unrest over there and everything going on?
Yeah, man, there's this is going to be, at least from my point of view, three total amateurs talking about a very complex and
whatever. I know so
topic.
Much.
Yeah,
that disclaimer is perfect.
The key started with the wrong person. I guess I think about it on a couple of levels. I think about it on just a political, social level. Obviously, there's unrest. There's conflict. People are suffering, and so there's that humanitarian level that I think would be true no matter where this conflict is happening. And obviously, it's an ongoing conflict that's been happening really for centuries, but certainly over the past 100 years, since Israel became a nation state in the 1940s. And really even before then, when the Jewish people really began to migrate back to Israel, Palestine, in the early 1900s. So there's a tremendous amount of history that's there. And again, that's why for us over in San Diego and Texas, we just don't have that perspective. But I know Keith and I have been able to go over there. Abby, I don't know if you've been over to Israel, but
I haven't. It's on my bucket list, but I'm going to hold off.
Yeah, it is something that I think is a real privilege to be able to do, because otherwise all you're seeing are clips. And I would say that too, that almost everything you're seeing, it's not just coming from an unbiased point of view. It's coming from typically either a pro-Israel or a pro-Palestinian point of view, and you're going to have to filter that out, or just be aware that someone's giving you details, but it's not all the details, and the details are being presented in a certain way. So, I mean, the first level I think is the humanitarian side, and then the second one kind of gets into, well, what are the implications for this? Since Israel, the Jewish people, that part of the world is such a huge part of the scriptures and even prophecies that we have, that as believers, most believers are still looking forward to being fulfilled. Um, and so, we can kind of talk about it on those two levels. Um, but I actually try to keep it mostly on the humanitarian side because um, I think that I personally do believe that God has a purpose and a plan for the Jewish people, and for that part of the world specifically. There's so many prophecies that um, are in the scriptures, and I just finished reading Ezekiel in my Bible reading plan, and I'm reading the last 8-9 chapters of Ezekiel, where he's talking about this new temple and his people, and how the Levites are going to be doing sacrifices. And I just have to say, I don't know. Like, is that actually still going to happen? Is it actually going to be that literal that there will be another temple? Because the stuff I was reading in Ezekiel, it has not happened yet. So even though a temple was built after Ezekiel, the second temple that Jesus would have visited, that was after Ezekiel. But it's still, what Ezekiel was describing was not happening. God's people were still under the rule of Rome at that time. So I think Paul in Romans 9 through 11, as I read those chapters, it does seem to me that there is a future purpose and plan that God has for the Jewish people, and for the physical descendants of Abraham. How these recent events play into that, I have no idea. I really don't. I do think that we can become too quick to assume that the end times are here because these rocket attacks are happening, or something is happening. I really don't think it's going to go down that way. I think, like Jesus said, no one knows. So I would say that there's unrest between these two people groups right now, the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I'm sure it has some connection to God's plan, but I don't have a verse in the Bible that I could say, like, oh, these rocket attacks are talked about in Revelation, chapter 13, and this is a sign that it's all coming to an end, guys. I would have thought, honestly, like, if I lived in the 40s, like,
Yeah.
Hitler was the Antichrist. Like, this was so obvious that Jesus is coming back any day now, and obviously that hasn't happened. So I just think we need to be humble and trust God, and not get too caught up in this latest flare up of conflict over there.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to know your friends, man, Andrew. I think that was a good response. Just got to know your friends. Sometimes I don't know if I could have tackled that the way you approached it that first time. But
well, I think too, you got to know your friends. I mean, I think all of us have people that are very passionate about this, like in the Christian community, that very pro-Israel. I don't know if you'd say anti-Palestinians, but and so sometimes they can want you to be just as passionate, or just as focused on, I guess, the geopolitical events as they are. But Abby, have you experienced that in your interactions with people there in your church or your community?
Not specifically in our church. We really try to steer clear of all political things, and I feel like this falls into that category just to a lot of extent. But I agree that I think we should focus on just the real tragedy that's going down. However you look at this, there's a lot of people being deeply impacted, just in this whole thing, because war is not awesome. So that being said, I will say I kind of do look at this spiritually, for sure, because we do know that God is at work in all nations. He puts people on the throne and he takes them off. We know that God is at work to draw people to himself. And so I really think that's my big prayer. And what I try to bring up when this comes up in conversation is just, wow, clearly big things are happening. And we just need to be praying for hearts to turn to Jesus because of this. And I'm glad you brought up the 40s, Andrew, because I think we saw a lot of Jews come to Christ through their Christian neighbors during that time. We also lost a lot of Jews, which was, tragic and horrible. No matter what, genocide is a terrible thing. So I think anytime we see movement of this nature, even in our own country, we want to be praying and asking God to use it for his great purposes. That's what our mind should turn to, is how is this going to bring people to Jesus on both sides. My weird and only Abigail's idea, I'm not going to write a book on this, is that God is going to use the Muslims to make the Jews jealous, because I think having Muslims come to Christ and worship Christ and recognize him as a savior would make Jews furious, like beyond belief. But it should also, there's, verses about the Jews being jealous, and that's their way. And I think who better to be jealous of than your literal cousins? So I also pray for that side of this conflict. So I think we don't know how it will turn out, but I do think that we're safe when we pray, when we ask God to use this for his purposes, to draw men and women to him. And this conflict has been going on literally for generations. And I think the only place that we can really do better is not just taking a side,
right,
of like the Jews are right or the Palestinians are right, but just blanketly because we're Christians. But instead to really see how we can humanitarily help. Are there, ways that we can help these people who are just locked in conflict, and, children starving and so forth? So what can we do on that front? Because I think that's really the only way we as just little people can help in any way, but also just really praying, because whether it's the end times or not, these are real humans in the middle of a horrible conflict, and how this is when people start getting on their knees. So I'm just begging Jesus to bring people to him.
Yeah, I think that's a cool way to respond, Abby. Like that's definitely the proper response, because God's not limited like we are. We can only do so much. Our range only extends so far, but his doesn't. So falling on our knees is is a very appropriate response. And I think for me, I'm learning that it's okay to not know how to feel or not know, like you said, where to stand on some of these things, because you do see people being quick to respond, and I think that was James' warning in his book, was saying be quick, quick to listen, quick to hear, quick to understand. So I think a lot of believers are more so quick to respond, to where you can see something very tragic or something, and instead of being sympathetic or empathetic, it's a very hard line that's drawn in the sand. So I think when I do see things going down in the Middle East, it does make my ears perk up just about, hey, but how does this relate to the end times? Like, and I don't want to be insensitive, because people did lose their lives. But if we're keeping it all the way like 100, like all of us are going to go that way at some past, being able to think about the big picture and like think like, how does this apply to Jesus's time and him coming back? Just almost motivates me to stay focused on him and help people focus on him. So not saying that we have the answers or that we know exactly how to respond to this, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it and have a civil conversation where we're not saying, okay, these people.
Yeah, so many themes that I think we come back to over and over on this in our conversations. I mean, one of them is, being able to keep a kingdom focus in a world that I think has become so political. Everything's politics. And then I think another one is social media and how we handle those kind of conversations. So I've definitely seen believers on really, I would say, if there's both sides of this latest conflict. I have friends who are very, I would say, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, and then I have friends who are super pro-Israel, and they're always going to side with that side no matter what happens. And the conversation is kind of happening on that level, and it's not necessarily even happening on maybe the higher kingdom level or what is God doing.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to be, I think we have to be humble at a certain level. Like I'm reading Daniel now, so I'm reading about how God is using Nebuchadnezzar, this really violent, wicked king. I mean, this guy was killing people just at the drop of a hat, if they didn't do what he wanted them to do. And yet God had a purpose and a plan for Nebuchadnezzar, and revealed himself multiple times to this evil pagan ruler. And so, like Abby, like you said, God is working. I think that's something that we can have confidence in. He's working even through some of the evil and the human fallenness that we see. It doesn't mean that God isn't at work. He actually is at work. So it's something that should drive us to pray, and but to also just admit that I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but I'm confident God is working.
Yeah. Well, as usual, this was I think a really good one. I'm super thankful for you guys. Zach, we miss you a lot. Love you, brother. Be safe on the road. And yeah, if you like what we're doing here, you want to see it grow, I think on our YouTube page, we're at like 353 subscribers or something like that. And we really want to get to 500. And you can help with that by clicking the like button or writing a comment or giving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Those are all things that you can do to get this message out. So we thank you guys, and we will see you in the next couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye, guys.